Professor, good evening, Bharani here.
Yes, hi, good evening, Bharani.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
Uh, yes, sir. So just a question. I'm not sure whether, as part of today's agenda, do we have something on this ROC curve?
Return. Yeah, we will briefly talk about it. Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, you
Because
have.
it'll
Is it RAC or ROC? It's Risk Assessment
ROC,
Code.
receiver operating characteristics.
Okay,
Receiver operating
because
characteristics
there
curve.
is something that we will talk about today on RAC, which is Risk Assessment Codes, and then we will also briefly mention about ROC. It is, I mean, it's not there as part of the thing, but we can talk about it because that is the benchmark that is used globally for coming up with fraud and risk related KPIs.
Because that would be helpful and it would be a quick refresher for us too.
Yes,
For the project, it
sure.
would be much helpful too.
True. ECM is what we will definitely talk about, and roll rate matrix is what we'll talk about, and we will bring this up. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Thanks.
Okay. All right, guys. As we move on, if there are any other questions before we start our last session today, and welcome to that. Today we are going to be talking about uh, risk analytics again, and in risk analytics today we are going to talk about. Yeah. Today we're going to talk about the last part, a little bit of extension of where what we did in our last session. We're going to talk a little bit more about risk, and we wrap up a few things that we want to talk about as part of risk assessment matrix, and what is and how do you ensure that you put a very robust risk assessment matrix to be able to prioritize which risks you must definitely look at and which not. So So that's what we are going to be talking about. In our last session, we were talking about different types of risks, and we said risk needs to be looked at the portfolio level, as well as risk only if the portfolio is not healthy. Are you going to look at it at the customer level or at the micro level to be able to see whether this customer at the micro level poses the risk or not? Okay, so operational credit risk again is at the customer level or is at the individual level, whereas the regulatory risk is at the portfolio level. It's important that you have a sort of a policy, risk assessment policy. And in this risk assessment policy, the framework should typically involve what are the hazards that you have identified are actually risk posing factors to your organization. And these risk posing factors, what you need to do is You assess based on the priorities that you're going to look into, which is high, medium, or low. And once you assess them, you make a decision or an action plan as to how you're going to implement the priority ones first, followed by the less priority, followed by the least risky. And probably many a times, you're not going to look at the least risky risks at all at times in the event of looking at the most priority high ones. You will obviously come up with a better process, better robust process to implement these controls. And whether they are working or not is going to be a continuous process and not a one-time process to ensure that whatever you're doing is actually helping you make the right decision and it is in line with the fraud and risk policy that you as an organization have put in. Okay, and if not, then you're going to rephrase. So it is a continuous process and never a one-time process. You're going to make sure that you're going to look at these aspects at least once a year. Your risk that you identify needs to be identified at least once a year, unless it is a regulatory or an environmental hazard which you had no control on, like the COVID, and you have to look into it when you're considering that risk to be able to factor in, what action plans you need to make. So operational risk management, when you are looking at an assessment of risks, two factors are very, very important, or rather two variables are very, very important before you can do anything. And one is the probability of that risk, and the other one is the severity of that risk. Now, how do we explain? Of course, we can see what we can see, but how do we explain probability of that risk and severity of that risk? What do you understand by these terms, probability and severity? Anyone? Probability of risk and severity of risk. Yes, anyone please, on what is your take or understanding on probability and severity? Probability is obviously the definition says chance. And when you say chance, it is what is the chance that this risk is going to be occurring. And if the chance is very high, obviously it goes into the red zone. If the chance is not very high, it remains in the green zone, for example. So the probability is nothing else but that chance or that likelihood of whether it is going to occur or not. Yeah? So if probability is not frequency, by the way, Jaya, a number of times a risk can occur. I would rephrase the word because it sounds like it is frequency. It's not frequency. It is the likelihood. It is the probability and therefore the chance part of it. The severity is obviously the impact. And if the impact is going to be as dangerous as possible, then it's going to be, then you need to work on it. But if it's not, then it's okay. So the damage could be catastrophic, it could be critical, it could be, not very critical, and therefore you define these to the extent that you would like to, so that you can work with it to be able to prioritize what you need to prioritize on. And a combination of probability and severity is going to help you. A combination of probability and severity is basically going to help you determine whether you are going to focus on this particular risk or not. Okay. Now, why is this important? Why can't we just, why do we have to prioritize the risks? Risks are risks, but why do we need to prioritize on that? Because resources are limited and you can't get 100% all the time. It's impossible that you are going to work on all risks because you are here. Your key objective is profit making. And if you're going to take some risks in business, it is coming with a certain package, and that package needs to be understood. It is an acceptable risk that you got to do. And therefore, no matter what your business is, no matter how conservative, prudent your business is, it is still exposed to some risks, but those are within permissible limits. And hence, because it cannot be 100% target achievement. It is absolutely essential to ensure that you have managed these risks based on the probability of that risk, the likelihood of that risk, and the severity of that particular risk that you have identified. Okay, based on the identification of that risk, you come up with a model, and that is, sounds exotic as a model, but you come up with a framework that says it's a risk assessment framework that looks at the probability and that looks at the severity of this particular risk. Okay, so an example of this could look something like this. You could create your own depending on the scales that you have and scales that you choose to. So, you have probability as a variable that we saw and severity as another variable that is what we have also seen. So this is probability. And this here is severity. Those are the two variables that we have seen. Now, normally it is good to have a sensitive scale and not a very yes, no kind of scale. So you will not say probability, yes or no. You'll probably say high probability, medium probability, low probability, or frequently occurring, likely occurring, seldom occurring, occasionally occurring. As long as you understand the meaning of these terms, it's okay. Otherwise, it could be a problem for someone to distinguish between occasional versus seldom, but have those definitions clear. Otherwise, a good scale would be very likely, somewhat likely, neutral, somewhat not likely, very unlikely. So you can have that kind of a 5-point scale also. Severity, you can decide on the severity point by saying whether it is catastrophic, critical, moderate, or no impact at all. Okay. So either you can have it like that, or you can call it as very severe, severe, not severe, no, or moderately severe and not severe at all. You can have it that ways as well. Now, when you look at these two together in your framework, that's when the output comes like. So if something is in AB as probability, which is here, and it is in catastrophic and critical, which is there, then it is going to be labeled as extremely high, which means all your resources have got to be working in that direction. And then you got to look at what is high, and then medium, and then lastly, let go of the lows. And this is what an organization needs to put in place when you are doing a risk assessment matrix for something that you would like to work on, to be able to prioritize what is a medium risk, high risk, or a low risk. Yeah. So when you go to an organization, you can find out for your own as well. When you go to an organization, the first question that you ask is, what is your risk policy or framework? And a little probe to that is, what is your risk assessment approach? And this is the approach that organizations need to present to you with regards to their strategy to handle those risks. If they don't have it, there is no controlled risk formulated structured approach to risk management, and that is a flaw in itself. So RAC, or risk assessment matrix, is a very strong indicator of whether or not you have a structured approach towards risk management or not. Yeah, if this is not there, then it is not a good or not a very structured approach. Okay. Clear about this, guys? Any questions on RAC? An important aspect from the industry perspective. Every organization is supposed to have it. It is there in the public domain. Highly advise you to, when you go back to work next, find out what is your RAC code, and what is it comprising of, and what are the measurements that people use on the probability and the severity side of it. Okay. So reshare it. Yeah, what is the question? Sorry. How do you ensure that the data we classified is correct? Bharani, a very important question. We've been talking about data right from the beginning of our fraud and risk analytics. And it is a given that none of this analytics is going to work unless and until you're dead sure about two things on the data. One is data reliability, which is it is free from errors, and data validity. So, which means it is answering your question or answering the objective. So if you have these two parameters taken care of, everything else is great. But if everything else is great and you're going to sit in the meeting room and question the data, then no matter what analysis tool you have, what technology you have, it's always going to not be sufficient. It's always going to be a compromise. Yeah. So the assumption for anything to work is a given, and that is that the data that you're using is accurate or reliable. Yeah. So that was our risk assessment framework or the risk assessment matrix, uh, which is important that we look into it. And now, how can a bank's customer be stressed? You know, you do a stress testing, and how can a bank's customer be stressed? Two ways of looking at that. One is, if the customer has overutilized their credit card limit. So if their limit is say $100, but they've taken an overdraft on their limit once, okay, twice, okay, multiple times, then that goes for a cause of a red alert at least. If not, if it is not in the right direction, you can cancel the facility of an overdraft onto the credit limit. And if it is a one time, it's okay. But if you track the behavior of the person, and if this person is not a regular paymaster, with regards to your credit card dues, obviously question it. Now, just last week, somebody told me, a friend of mine, he said that he took a loan on his credit card. He took a loan from his bank, and he gave it to obviously one of his family members. He gave it to his, I don't know what, brother or brother-in-law, one of the two, and he gave it to them, or him rather, and it was meant that the installments would be paid by him, that is his whatever relative. But 6 months down the line now, for 6 months it was paid. It's a 5-year loan, and the credit card overdraft was taken, of which nothing was getting paid. And now in the absence of making a payment, for whatever reasons, his credit history is getting impacted. He is not going to be able to do what he wants to. There are banks calling him up for collections, and as a result of which, he is barred from the bank for giving a credit card or getting any loan that he would like to get. So obviously, this reflects. So what I'm trying to say is, whether it is a purpose for yourself or for somebody else, this is going to be, you as a customer are going to be a red alert or a red flag for the bank, because you have not cleared your dues in a timely manner, in a consistent manner, as far as your history is concerned. Okay. Okay. And as a result of which, just like you look at the health of the brand, you look at the health of your financials, you look at the health of your customers also. And these are the kinds of analysis that you want to do to be able to identify the segment of customers who fall under either delayed clearance or have been continuously utilizing the credit limits. Okay. And therefore, they also call it as a stress test that they will do at the portfolio level first. That yes, our customers seem to be healthy at the portfolio level. They don't seem to be healthy at the portfolio level. You will drill down and make sure that you are testing this at the individual micro level as well. Existing customer management is a stage that you want to, just when you onboard a customer, start a relationship. It is not mas salama after that. It is regular intervention to check, make sure that the portfolio of your customers is healthy. And that is what we mean by existing customer management. Whether this customer is on the right path, or is there a glitch, is there a problem, is there a red alert, then that customer goes into the watch list. So operational risks, three broad kinds of operational risks that happens with the customer during the different stages of interaction with the customer: at the time of acquisition, at the time of, after the customer is acquired with regular customer management, And like the example of my friend that I just gave, his account is now managed by the collection and recoveries team, because they need to recover the monies that he had paid, he had taken and has not paid as yet. Yeah. So three broad areas. So operational credit risk, the analytics, different analytics at the different stages, and they are as follows. So here you have your risk analytics or your acquisition that you look at, or the management that you look at, and the collections and recovery that you're going to look at. So acquisition, is this customer genuinely worth it? Does he or she have a good credit history? Do you believe that this customer is going to be not causing any trouble to the organization or the bank? Management, regular management of that customer, behavioral analysis of that customer's transaction analysis, to be able to know that the group or the segment or the individual customer itself is not an issue, and it is the health of the customer that you are checking, so that directly you can say that if because of the health of the customer is good, the bank seems to be healthy as far as its customer portfolio is concerned. Collection and recovery is obviously a distinct area. The baseline for collection recovery itself is a problem. Customers who have not been regulars are therefore transferred to this department. And organizations keep a bucket list. Bucket list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 usually is what banks have. And first, 30 days, nothing, no problem in the past. But now, okay, first 30 days, no problem. And then it is going to the bank, who is going to call the customer and ask the customer to make the payment. If not, then it is passed on to the collection recoveries agents. Okay. But now I think that 30-day gap has gone down to about 10 or 15 days, where the call or an SMS definitely pops up saying, you haven't made your payment, kindly do so. And if it's a 1 month, then the SMS gets transferred into a voice call, and then it gets to the recovery and collections agent. So that's the different kinds of risks that you need to be worried about at the different stages of the customer life cycle. So when you are analyzing the records at the different stages, you have the objectives. At the acquisition stage, the approvals that you want to do, you want to make sure that you are getting a healthy set of customers and not a problem. You can have various sources of data about the customer. One source of data, which is very, very important, though classical, is the credit history of the person. Also things nowadays like social media presence, your LinkedIn account, your education levels, your mobile phones that you own, your travel history, your designation, all of that becomes important to determine the solidity of your organization, of you as an individual. Model building. Now, when you build a model, you'll see these things, and we'll talk about this. And in terms of stability of the model, you have short-term as well as long-term stability of the model that you want to make sure that the model is performing, which again is something that we're going to be talking about. So on the acquisition stage, how does it actually work? It works when there is a customer who comes in and says, hey, I want a credit card, and who applies for it for the bank. The bank is going to accept the credit card along with the documentation that supports the application, and it's going to go through an internal review. Firstly, they put in your names to check whether you're on an international watch list, whether you're on a red alert list, and then see your other supporting documents like your credit history to determine whether this is an okay customer. If or should you is not a very okay customer, but you can start with a lower limit, or seems to be a perfectly fine customer, and therefore there's no need to do any further checks, and you move ahead and you give the customer whatever a credit card or a loan that they've asked for, and therefore the decision is happened. Okay, you can decide, you can modify, underwrite it to a certain extent in terms of the credit limit or the loan amount. If you've asked for $100, if the records don't support it, the application, The banks turn around and say that you asked for 100, but we can only give you $80. And that's an underwriting agreement that the bank will come to you with, which you may or may not accept. So when you're acquiring something, so with that objective in mind, with that sources of data that has happened, when you're building up the model, you must make sure that you focus on reject inferences, underwriting grid, and other things. But let's talk about the problem that might happen before you build your model at the acquisition stage. So the customer who walks in and says, I want to start a relationship, loan or credit card, and either they get accepted or they get rejected based on whatever checks and balances that you would have done at the back end to be able to take that decision. So reject inferences is a technique that you use in your model building. And that's made up of three kinds of reject inferences: test and learn, successful if the bank has enough budget and a good culture, because it is continuous learning, and it can only happen if you, as a culture, you are encouraging the fact that mistakes are meant to be learned and improved upon, and mistakes does not mean failure but opportunity for improvement. Downstream bureau data is successful if rejects were approved elsewhere. So you kind of juxtapose or you kind of extrapolate that data somewhere else about your customer, and you impose that onto your analysis of that customer. Parceling and augmentation is you building a model on earlier approvals or past behavior and use that to be able to come up with a score for your customer in terms of acceptance or rejection. Yeah. So test and learn, downstream bureau data, and parceling and augmentation. In terms of model validation, what is it that you need to work on is how does your model perform in the long run? The discriminatory power of the model is an important variable to consider. Why? Because as a model, there should be a clear segmentation, a clear distinction between accepting or rejecting, or this customer is healthy, this customer is a problem. And your model should be able to throw that. It could be overwritten, which is a separate story, but therefore, or a variety of variables, a comprehensive range of variables need to be coming in for the model to be able to give you this discriminatory power between accept and reject, or between a good versus a bad customer, if I can use those words. Accuracy of the model. How strong is that model with regards to predicting what it can predict? And this is going to be tested many a times. If the model has said reject, but in fact it was not a reject, it was a good, healthy customer. And therefore, what is the accuracy levels? Normally, the accuracy levels should be 90+% for a model to be successful. The more higher it is, the better it is. Normally, acceptable norms or standards are 90+%. And stability of the model cannot be shaky. Just because you have wide range of variables, the model cannot be overutilized or overcapacity. Depreciation for any kind of a technological or furniture or any kind of asset is usually 5 years. The stability of a model nowadays is looking at anywhere between 1 to 3 years, wherein you then look at enhancements that you want to make to the model or additions that you want to make to the model. Okay, so discriminatory power, accuracy or calibration, and stability in terms of ensuring that the model is consistently delivering and what it is expected to deliver. So here's an exercise that we will be doing. So just take a look at this, guys. This is reject inferences. There are 4 types of applicants: A, B, C, and D. The A segment, look at the data that is available. You have their demographic data, the behavioral data, the target variable exists. So you are able to predict whether there is fraud or not fraud. And therefore, this is straightforward. You decide whether you can accept or reject based on the decision that you are taking. So you have accepted these set of customers based on the inferences that you would have made. The B, C, D are your problematic or cannot not clear decision makers, because yes, you have demographic data for all these segments, but you don't have their behavioral data. You have behavioral data of these segments from outside, or rather outside of the bank. Yes, you do from the credit bureau for one of them, but not for these two of them. Any historical behavioral data prior to 2017, you have it for this segment. No possibility of a target variable. And therefore, what you do is, in this particular case for B and C, you've used their transaction behavior to be able to predict them as good and bad, including data that you have, including data that is there with the credit bureau, including data that is there before the time period that you're considering, to be able to then bring it in line with the others, which is apples to apples and not apples to oranges. The D segment is obviously you are also, in the absence of any data, what you have done is you have looked at their behavior data, their demographic data, and kind of extrapolated and derived a so-called target variable for them. So now you brought all the four segments to a common platform for you to be able to take, work with them in the future. So what we will do as a class is just take a picture shot of this if not already taken. Uh, Remember, the reject inferences are test and learn, downstream bureau data, and parsing and augmentation. You can take a picture shot of this if you need to. The question on hand is, what type of reject inferences, so what type is, which of these types was used to create the target variable in the case of B, C, and D? Yep. And that is what we want to understand. Uh, and that is what we want to learn as well. So we've got we've got 8 people so far. That's brilliant. So we'll quickly put you into the breakout room, and when we come back, we're going to talk about this as a group. Okay, Jaya, no worries. I'll share it again. And as I share it again, this, I think if you know it, great. Otherwise, take a picture of this. And this one is what the treatment that has been given to the 4 segments. Yeah. So this one and this one to be able to answer this question. Jaya, got it? Perfect. So let's give you about 15 minutes to discuss this as part of your group. And then when we come back, let's try and discuss this in terms of what is the approach that was taken by, for the 3 segments that you are studying. Yeah. So we put you into 2 because 2 should be good enough, and 10 to 15 minutes, not more than that. All right, everybody is here. Yep. All right, great. So who wants to go first, guys, in terms of what we want to talk about, room 1 or room 2?
Hi, Professor. I'm
Hello.
from room 1.
Okay.
So what we have analyzed from the task that for the datas or the categories like B and C, we have noticed it consists of both past datas and also the bank data had the budget to analyze the existing data. So if we want to categorize B, C, and D, it falls under the rejection categories of test and learn. And for explicitly for B and C, we have categories like parceling and augmentation, since they have old data from 2017 to 2020, and for C previous to 2070. So we can categorize B and C explicitly apart from test and learn, also on parceling and augmentation.
Okay.
This is how we are segregating.
So for which method are you suggesting? For which segment are you saying parceling and augmentation?
So category B, C, D, all will have test and run, since they have the all of the three will have bank data with them. And explicitly, in addition to that, B and C have past data around 2070 to 2020 for B, and for C before 2017. So in addition to test and learn, they also have this kind of categorization at parceling and augmentation. But
So
category
yeah,
D does not have that.
B and C will have downstream and credit bureau, and D will also have parsing and augmentation. That's what you're telling?
Yes.
Okay. What about the other room? Room 2? I think room 2, yeah.
Yeah, so broad, so these reject inferencings on the also we have also analyzed on these three this thing B, C, and D. So B, C, D in B and C we can do the test and learn because we have the past data available. But and even for C or both B and C, but D I think will be for parceling and augmentation, because we have to since most of the things are unavailable here, we have to we can run a model and then complete the data set which is available. That's how we can do.
All right. Okay. So good. So guys, let's now try and sum this up. So what is our reject inferences here? Reject inferences basically have got to be doing with applications that got rejected. We want to use them to be able to build a better scorecard, to be able to come up with a method so that we can, do something with those overtly rejected applications and make some sense out of that data that you see. So in the first case, what we've got is we've got a test and learn approach, because we have a nice wonderful demographic behavioral segment data for this particular set of people, and we have invested in this, and therefore we were able to do what we had to do. In the case of B and C, we have used the past behavior data from us, not necessarily, but from the credit bureau, and in some case before 2017 data. So that has helped us to put together downstream credit bureau data, and that is what we have done. And parsing and augmentation, in the absence of any data that is available to us, we have whatever little data of demographics that is there with us, we have extrapolated that to be able to come up with deciding what we need to do. Is there anything that we need to do with this segment in terms of reversal of the rejections, to be able to accept them or not, or are they fraudulent or not? Yeah, whatever be the decision that you want to take with that. Okay, good.
Professor, just a query. When you say downstream credit bureau data, it is like the CIBIL score and other aspects, right? From the agencies.
From the external agencies, correct.
Okay, sorry. I mean, to be frank, I didn't understand the question clearly before we during other discussion also, I didn't understand the question pretty well. We were
Okay.
under the impression like maybe for the model, which applicant would be much more, which sort of information is critical, because reject inferences is learning from your, the rejections and reasons for rejections. That from that you try to improve your model, right? Capture all the
Correct. Yeah.
so
Because
yeah.
based on the variables, you have rejected applications B, C, and D. Okay. Now that is a classical approach. With technology on your side, you have used this information to be able to decide that from the rejected applications, is there anybody who you still want to take or consider as your customer in the future or not?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So, and then the last part of this goes to our model validation, whether it is on the long term or the short term, whether it is having the power to discriminate accuracy and stability, what we saw, and there are other metrics also, which we will be talking about soon. So, what are the metrics that you want to put in place as a part of your risk analytics framework? You have an approval rate, which is very important. Approval rate is, suppose there are 100 applications that have come in, you've approved 10 of them and therefore 10%. You've approved 50 of them and therefore 50%. So approval rate is basically number of applications approved out of the total universe of applications that you've got. 100 minus approval rate will give you the opposite, and that's the rejection rate. That is straightforward. Auto approval rates, the auto approval rates are approval rates that the machine, that the program has thrown up based on certain conditions that you have put in place. So, if all the applications have gone through your machine or through a program, and then an output comes saying good, bad kind of story, and that's an auto approval or an auto rejection that has happened. Sometimes when a model approves, human rejects, or the vice versa. Model rejects, human approves, and that's the investigation that the human touch needs to do, and that's called as overriding. So you have two kinds of overrides: high override as well as a low override. High override is when the model approves but humans reject, and the opposite of that is when the model rejects but humans approve, and that's a low side override rate. Okay. So key metrics that we put together, which is widely used in the business world, is approval rates. 5 of them: approval rates, obviously rejection rate is the opposite of approval rate, overriding rates, and high overriding rates and low overriding rates. You can have auto approval and auto rejections also. So if you were to look at this example with us, we see that there are a total of 10,000 applications that have been received. Auto accepted by the model is 3,000 and auto rejected by the model is 2,500. Okay, so that's what has happened by the program, and therefore the balance is now got to be done for manual review. From the manual review, 2,400 out of not 10,000 but 4,500, they are accepted manually, and 2,100 are rejected manually. You manually remove from auto accepts. What does that mean? If you've auto accepted 3,000, 300 of them have been removed for whatever reason, and therefore the balance auto accepts now becomes 2,700. Manually removed is 500 out of 2,500, so therefore the balance is 2,000. Looking at the net between the system as well as you, 5,600 total accepted, and therefore 4,400 total rejected. Okay. Now, what we will do, soon we will do this. We will do this not right away, but in the next 5 or 10 minutes. We will want to calculate the approval rate, the rejection rate, the override rate, the high side override, as well as the low side override rate. So just keep this handy for now. Take a picture and take a picture of this. You will need this also, this part of the problem. And once you need that, then we will talk about it. Yeah. So an interesting question that gets asked across most forums, and I thought of touching upon this question here as well. And the question is, what is the future of machine learning? Will they replace human beings or not? What is your view, guys? Will machines replace human beings? Yeah.
Not replace human beings, but obviously our intervention will get much lower in future, because the kind of work currently also we can see that earlier manually which human used to do, so that is getting replaced by machines, by putting.
So Semanti, are you saying if you needed 5 people, now you need 2, but you still need 2?
Yes, that is the thing going forward.
So downsizing, yes, but not replacement.
Yes. Downsizing, so we can see everywhere. So downsizing is definitely the effect.
Downsizing is the new mantra at work.
Yes, but definitely it's not completely wiped out. Human intervention has to be there.
Okay. Jay, you said something. No, you want to talk about it? They cannot replace. Why not?
Because for maintenance, they would still need humans to do the maintenance for them, right? Ultimately, the machines are built by humans. So for maintaining, or if there are any issues, then the humans are there to only, correct if something is going wrong. Machines cannot correct themselves. Humans can do that.
Correct.
So
how many of you had this problem? At least not in the near future. With AI, is it still possible? At least as per Elon. Okay. Now, how many of you have spoken to have called up the call center and have got a voice automated message, and that has led to more frustration and anger as opposed to more delight? Has that happened? Or if you chatted with a chatbot, or if you've chatted with a call center automated machine, has it caused more frustration or has it caused more ease to us? Yeah. Yes, Palak, thank you for many times. But what is the outcome of that? Good or average or bad? Frustration, Jaya says. Personally, when I call up a bank and talk to the call center, and if I have a sophisticated request like a balance statement in dollars and not in the currency that I'm transacting, they don't understand it. And every time I ring, they say, is it this or is it that? But they just refuse to understand it. It gets even frustrating. Every button you press, it does not take you to a voicemail, a human talk, but it takes you elsewhere. So yes, personally, machines will they need to work as a strong enabler function. They need to complement and not substitute. You need to free up the human mind from mundane routine jobs and let them be working on strategic jobs to be able to utilize their times better. Machines, it's like saying, oh, you have robots serving you food at a restaurant. That's great. But does the robot understand what I want? Does the robot understand why I am ordering or how I'm ordering? And therefore, personally, yes, technology is great, but it has its limitations, and that human understanding is obviously required, and it will always be the case where it stays. Of course, it gets more competitive, but as long as you're able to understand, analyze, provide help in decision making, humans will always be required, no matter how sophisticated the technology is on hand. Yeah. Because not everybody, you run a program in Python, and it is very difficult for a common person to understand it. You need somebody to decipher it and help them take a decision. And if the output is there, and very many times the programmer cannot interpret and the interpreter cannot run it. So obviously it is a 2-member team that you require to be able to process and help management take a decision. And sometimes we come with this caveat, oh, he's the CEO, she's the CEO, so they don't have to understand. Well, if they don't have to understand it, my question is, why should I understand it? Yeah. So they also need to understand it. So if you need them to be able to come in a direction that helps take a decision, so does it at different levels within the organization. So machines, a strong enabler, never a substitute. Okay. So if you have a rejection rate, if you have a lot of rejection rates that the model is doing, then that definitely needs to be looked into, because it is a cause of concern. Bad customers are replacing with good customers, and therefore at the portfolio level you see a lot of problems with your customer health, because a lot of customers that were onboarded are bad customers. Bad customers means without any proper checks done onto them. Late payments, a customer is continuously or constantly making a late payment, and the customer has overutilized his or her credit card for a longer period of time than it would otherwise be. So the model needs to throw up these things for you to be able to investigate and prevent fraud from occurring. Long run, we spoke about it, and the metrics for long run are discriminatory power, to discriminate between the fraudulent and the non-fraudulent transactions, calibration or accuracy with which you are able to predict it, and the stability of the model to be able to work in that fashion or direction, at least for some period of time, and does not go through that change quite frequently. Okay. There is another, after this, we will go and do the exercise that we have to do. So there is something called as discriminatory power as long odds. And this is very important. Suppose you have, just as an example, 100 customers, 90 are good, as in they are, religiously making their payments, no problem to the bank, whereas 10 of them are not good customers because they are defaulting and they don't have a consistent behavior or pattern. What is your ratio? The ratio of good to bad and the bad to good will be the same. It's just that the way you present it is different. So if you were to talk about good to bad odds, which will be 9. If you want to talk about bad to good odds, which will be 1. Odds help in comparing rank orders. And as long as the model score increases, you must have a very good ratio or a higher ratio of good to bad odds. Okay, so if you have a good to bad odds ratio of say 7, cause of concern, because you have, for every 10 customers, 7 are good, but 3 are bad. The higher the ratio, obviously, the better it is. So this is an analysis tool that the model can give you in terms of discriminatory power of fraudulent or good or bad customer, to be able to determine what action you would like to take with that customer group. Okay. Okay, I'm going to not do this right now, but I'm going to, or should I just do it? Yeah, okay. Stability of the model. Here, what we're going to talk about is the variable distributions, that is distribution of the variable across the model. How many variables is it able to accommodate? Is it able to detect outliers pretty fast? How comprehensive is your model with regards to the variables that it uses? Population proportions, how much of the population are you covering as part of your sample? Normally about 50% plus is what gets covered. If it is advanced analytics or machine learning, it is as good as the population itself. There is no sampling that you do here. And how are you going to be able to predict patterns or behaviors? If somebody who's risky today will always be risky in life, and if somebody who's not risky today, will he or she always be not risky? And therefore, you should be able to predict consumer behavior patterns at least on an annual or a half-yearly basis. Some people say quarterly, but it's a stretch. So this is how you're going to test the stability of the model. This is from McKinsey and Company, and let's look into it. Yeah, it's here. The art of AI. Okay, this is the one.
Hybrid intelligence is about human and machine collaboration. It's about something that lasts, that isn't about control, but a mutual sustainment. My name is Sugwen Chung. I'm an artist and researcher working in the field of human and machine collaboration. I myself am a product of hybridity, you could say. My mother is a computer programmer and my father is an opera singer. Hybridity is really at the center of so much of what I do. I feel like I'm part of a new emerging guard of art practitioners who use code and data as a kind of paintbrush. For me, quite literally a paintbrush.
Sugwen is the living representation of what it means to bring the brilliance of a human mind and combine it with technology in order to do something really cool. The relationship between people and technology is so central to Quantum Black. Artificial intelligence specifically plays a role because it allows people to experiment in new ways that previously were impossible to do. And for Sugwen, that comes out in the best forms of representation in the art world.
At the very beginning of the project, we had to really figure out what it was that we could bring from Quantum Black versus what Sugwen needed in terms of input for the art.
We've worked with her on different levels, from what is the essence of Quantum Black and the products that we make here, to helping her think through what type of data she could possibly be using to power the machine learning algorithm that she wanted to use in her artwork.
One area that we really shared interest in was this idea of our natural ecology and ways to use data science and AI to find new understanding of the world around us.
We realized that the collaboration was going to be, we used Quantum Black's methodologies and we used data that related to Sugwen.
So I was thinking about where I grew up and that childhood moment of experiencing nature for the first time, which for me was the sprawling river. I really loved the metaphor of the river and data and how it's always changing, it's always in flux.
Our data scientists processed the data from the river and trained our causal nexus model. Causal nexus is a package that Quantum Black created. It was used to learn relationships between all of the different variables. It was able to form a network of how oxygen levels, pH levels, the water flow rate, whether it had rained, how these things related to each other. We were then able to pass this trained model onto the artist in a form that she could then query the model herself.
I'm further developing that model through connecting my EEG, my brainwaves, with the data. I've designed a new multi-robotic system that employs my own biofeedback that translates as positional gesture, but also the model data determines the direction of the robotic gesture. So I'm trying to layer this idea of the human body and river data on one canvas.
Causal nexus was the obvious choice for this project because it intrinsically requires both humans and technology to work. It's genuinely hybrid intelligence.
When I'm in the space of performance and painting with the robotic units, there is a mutual reliance with these machines that I can't ignore. We become part of this coherent, interconnected system, and that really changed how I think about robotic development.
Hybrid intelligence is the combination of the brilliance of the human mind and its problem-solving capabilities, as well as the application of innovative technology in order to address changing and challenging problems.
For me, hybridity is about imagination and about balance. And an openness that points to a more creative future moving forward.
So guys, some common trends that we are going to be looking at. How does this apply to fraud? Basically through neuro thinking and through neuroprogramming, things are getting more and more sophisticated to what it is going to be looking like using technology in the future. Deepak says something. Yes, AI truly also, yes, the Lambda of Google. But this is something that the big fours are now talking about with regards to neuro science, hybrid technology, metaverse. And if you've read it, kindly read it. That metaverse, all these are now getting into the economies and markets and segments and companies. And this part, particularly AI and hybrid intelligence, is going to be really useful in the case of fraud and risk analytics, where you interacting with the customer should be able to highlight based on their behavior, based on their ways and inputs, whether this can be classified as a genuine or a customer who's good to go or has some issues. Yeah. So having said that, guys, okay, let's quickly do this exercise that we want to. And if you've taken a picture of this, we can take that. And this is the question that we want to quickly calculate out of this. And I'm just going to give you about 10 minutes again in your breakout rooms to do that, so that we can come back and have a little bit of good feel of how and what we need to do. Okay. So we'll recreate these. Yeah, okay, it's gone that way. So all right, so let's open these. Another 10 minutes and then we'll discuss this here. All right, good. Every time we go into the breakout room and come back, we drop some people out, and I think they just leave the room itself. But thank you for coming back. So anyone who has got the answers, room 1, room 2?
Yes, Professor. So
Okay.
I think it was room 2. I, Manu Raju, and Deepak was there, I guess.
Okay.
Yes, room 1 actually.
Yeah. So can you just put up that slide of that where we have all the calculations?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. I thought, okay. Here, this one?
Yes. So the first one was to calculate the approval rate.
Yes.
So in which we had come up with, so total were around 10,000.
Right. Total applications were 10,000.
And out of that, final approved was 5,600.
Correct.
So I think we got around 56% of.
That is correct. So it is 5,600 divided by 10,000. It will never be 3,000 divided by 10,000. Yeah.
Yes, because we are taking the final approval here. So
Correct.
that's why we are doing it. And
Correct.
same for the rejection, we'll have 4,400 divided by 10,000.
Okay. So just hold on, Agya, just a minute. Room 2, the other room. Yeah. Room 2, clear 56% and 44%.
Yes.
Okay. So now can you take the lead and tell us about overriding rates?
Professor, what we discussed was that okay, so there were two kinds of overrides. One was where it was auto accepted by the model. Then some of the auto accepts were removed manually. That was part 1. The second part was when it was auto rejected by the model, and then some of the applications were manually removed from the auto rejects. So a combination of those two were the override percentage. Okay. So if we look at the numbers, the first one is 3,000 minus 300, which will be 2,700. Okay, which is remaining auto accepts. Similarly, remaining auto rejects is 2,000. So the actual override value would be 2,700 plus 2,000, which is 4,700, which is 47%.
47%.
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead. Who is that?
Sir, Agya here. I think we had a different approach. I'm not sure we are right or wrong.
Okay, which one are you saying that now, Agya? Is it override or higher?
For the override. For the override.
Okay.
Our answer is different to the other group. So what we took was we took the sum of 300 plus 500, which were manually auto accepted and rejected.
Manually removed and either auto accepted
so
or
it
auto
was
rejected.
800 total, and we divided it by 2,500, which was I think which was the total accepted by model and rejected.
Yeah. Is it only 2,500?
Plus 3,000, 5,500.
Plus 3,000
so 800
also.
by 5,500. We did
Correct.
that.
So it is G plus I, which is the manual removes, 300 plus 500, divided by the universe of auto accepts or rejects, which is 5,500. And what is the percent that you got?
It is 14.54%.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah. The other room, is that clear?
Yeah, but I had one question. Okay, we understood this part that we should have taken 300 and 500 as the number.
Correct.
Okay, but why are we dividing it by 5,500? Why not by?
Because override is right here. It refers to the cases in which the model's decision is overridden manually. So so that's why. Yeah.
Okay, I thought that it should have been divided by 10,000, so we would have got the total override.
Correct. That is also a common thing that we get into, but we got to take it out of the ones that were thrown up for discussion, which is the auto accept or auto reject.
Okay, so it will be 800 divided by 5,500.
Correct.
Okay.
And now the other group, what is high override rate? Agya and gang?
Yeah.
So,
So
so
the
just a
higher,
question. Sorry, Agya, just a
yeah,
point.
no worries.
With respect to override, just one point. Like, see, override. Now we spoke about machine acceptance and then manual rejection or manual acceptance, right?
Correct.
And also we do something here, like whatever accepted, this thing also like manually also has been cross verified and it has been rejected by the machines. So do
Correct.
we need to take that into consideration for override when you do?
No. Override is basically the universe of auto accept rejects and what has happened out of that.
Okay, so only the machine to
only the machine
model.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Professor.
And now, therefore, what is the low or the high override rates? So high override rate, one more time, is when the model approves, but humans reject.
Okay.
Anybody?
Yeah, Professor. So Agya,
Yes.
yeah, I'll continue. So for the, as you said, it is the model approves and the human rejects. So we have seen the order accepted by model is 3000.
Correct.
But out of that, manually removed were around 300.
So it is
300
3000 divided by 300 or 300
no,
divided by
300 divided by 3000.
Yeah. And that is?
That is 10%.
10%. Yeah. So since high override is when the model approves but human rejects. So model has approved, whatever. The model has totally accepted 3000. And what you have removed out of that is 300. And therefore, that is 300 divided by 3000. And that's 10%. The converse of that will be what? Anybody?
So I'll continue. So in the same case, auto rejected will take, in this case, for the low side, we take which the model rejects and the human approves. So the auto rejected and model is 2500, which will come in the denominator. And out of that, which were manually removed, were 500.
Correct.
So it would be 500 by 2500, is almost 20%.
Very true. And therefore, correct. So it is, so that is not almost 20%, it is 20%.
Yes, it is 20%.
Yeah. So that's the percentages that we've got. 56% rejection rate in a sense is no brainer. It is 100 minus that, but nevertheless a matrix. Override rates, high override rates and low override rates. So these are the metrics out of a model that you want to look at to be able to know the efficacy of the model. Approval rates should usually be higher in the sense more than 51%. Rejection rates cannot be higher, and that's a short-term indicator. Your override rates should be as low as possible because your high override and low override should also be, in this case, your low override rate seems to be a little on the higher side of 20%, and therefore I would investigate whether the variables that you're using in the model are correct or they require a change. My target should be to pump up the approval rates from 5600 to a better calculation, so my override rates get better, my growth targets also get better. Yes, Bharani, that's why we are spending time, because you can expect these kind of questions on the term end exam. Okay, but straightforward calculations, you will know there is no complicated issues to know. It's going to be as simple as the one that we've done here, and we will be talking about the TEE as well. So having said that, now let's move on. Now here, we don't want to again go back into the room. Let's do it as a class. We are looking at model validation, and just read what you want to read about model stability and see which one of these statements best describes the model stability in this particular case. Any answers? If you have, you can tell me. Okay, might be C. Okay. Bharani or Jaya, either of you, why are you saying C, please?
Professor, I feel the set of variables cannot be the same for a model building, and that too. So you will have a different set of variables. That's one. And second point, it cannot be extremely diversified also, because that will maybe the model will not be viable if it is in practical. So it should be slightly different, but not exactly a bigger one. So that's the
Correct.
logic behind which
Agree, completely agree, Bharani, because if it is very different, then it will fail the purpose of of discriminatory power and stability also, and that is not something that you would like to do if it is going to show a very different thing. Now, they are different, and that's why the names S1 and S2, otherwise they would have had the same names, but they can't be significantly different. They are going to show the target variable, which is fraudulent or not fraudulent. So the answer C is correct, and I would also go with that based on the rationale that we've discussed. Good. Let's look at the second one now. Yeah, and just read this and tell me which statement is most suitable for this kind of for what you read, obviously. D. Yeah, I would also go with D here, the stability of the predictive pattern of the model. And in that definition, it covers the stability part as well as it is able to discriminate itself by identifying the problems versus the non-problem areas. And so, yes, of the four statements, the D statement is the most relevant to what we read here. Good. Now, there is something that you also check with the existing customer management, and that's something called as delinquency. What do we understand by delinquency? When is somebody delinquent? Anyone? What do we understand by delinquency?
When a customer is unable to pay their dues within a stipulated time, within the due date, basically.
Very correct. So if suppose a customer was supposed to pay his or her bill, credit card bill or the loan amount today, and they have not paid it today, that customer is become delinquent as far as the bank is concerned. Why? Because you were supposed to pay today, you didn't pay today, khalas, so therefore you're a part of a delinquent customer. Now, when you calculate delinquency, of course, you're not going to send the police tomorrow morning for a day. And therefore you put them in buckets, and these buckets are based on whether it, as I said, first 30 days, then 45 days, then 60 days, then 90 days, then 120 days. Now anything in the past, anything over 120 days would go to the recovery agents to recover, but nowadays that has changed. Anything past 45 days immediately goes to the recovery agent. And the first flag, it comes not after 30 days, but comes after 15 days itself. So things have been brought forward in terms of ensuring that the customer does not default, and that enough amount of time is given through constant follow-ups before you can say, hey, I need to give this to my recovery and collection agents to be able to run after this. Remember, giving it to a collection recovery agent involves cost, and you want to minimize that cost also, and you want a healthy portfolio of your customers. So delinquency is measured in the area of days past due. As I said, more the number of days, the more problem it is. Less the number of days, it is within the bank that you manage it. If it's a one-off situation, the customer will pay back. Then there is no problem of you being worked up about the customer. So something that is important as part of you to be able to manage, and that is the delinquency rate of the customer. You have, which is also called as the roll rate matrix, and also something called as a vintage curve. It is like a trend analysis to be able to see whether this customer has been healthy or not has been healthy for the X time period that you have looked at the customer. Okay, so this is like a time sheet or a time trend analysis to be able to look at the different time periods of the customer segment movement in the last X years, or last 1 year, or last 2 years, whatever you want to look at. And if the curves are more and more steeper, then obviously it is a volatile structure. As long as they are more steady, it is a decent movement in your portfolio of the customers that you're looking at. Lastly, when you move on to the collections and recovery side of the story, you have three broad buckets. And these three broad buckets are as follows: early delinquents, secured products, and late delinquents. So early delinquents either gets into self-cures, which is, I just did a default this month, but next month I'm back on track. I did not pay yesterday, but I paid today. So there are no issues with those kinds of people. Non-self cures is they've continuously been being delinquent and they don't change their position. So therefore, intervention is required. You also have something with secured products. And when you have a secured product, we also call it as a collateral. So if you're taking a loan, the bank at times takes your car or takes your house or takes some gold, takes whatever kind of assets as a collateral. So if you don't make a payment, or if you have a defaulter payment, then the bank is going to get its monies done from the collateral that it owns. Late delinquents, and these late delinquents are basically sell off the property that is on there. They've continuously not made softer coercion, meaning there's a court case on this person. You either also say, instead of giving me $100, okay, fine, you give me $80 only, and let's close the case now. So different buckets in which you will put the customer in. This is not a very good sign on the part of the bank, and therefore it is only after prudent care and invert checks that the customer group or the customer is passed on in the bucket of collection and recovery. And obviously it requires an external agency to help you with this area. So when in your collection of models, you want to look at a variety of models that is going to help you determine the health of the customer. Frequency is very high, and if the frequency is regular, causes a cause of concern. Action effect, has the customer committed to the actions that they have made, or the promises that they have made, or they continue to resort to the practices that you don't want as a bank to take. And therefore, the customer segment is at risk, and you are going to deal with this risk-based customers, and you have to take action. Otherwise, it is going to spoil the portfolio or the health of the customers that you're dealing with. So just some final words of summarization. So different life cycle of the customer. Acquisition, the objective is obviously to get good customers and distinguish good from the bad customers. In your regular customer management, you want to determine their transactions. How are they doing it? Are they healthy? Are they not healthy? So you determine the health of the customer. And collection and recovery, to be able to make sure that you get your dues, and there is no default that is going to be a problem which the bank has to write off, or which the bank has to incur as a loss. The models for this particular things are the acquisition stage. The model is about 3 to 5 years. At the management stage, the time period of usage is about 1 to 2 years. And in the recovery agents, you're going to use the time period of 2 to 6 weeks. You can't say last 5 years what has happened. So that is the time period reference that you want to use in your model to be able to come up with the target variable. Specific characteristics in the acquisitions, we saw rejecting inferences and what is the treatment that we want to give. Roll rate matrix or delinquency, vintage analysis is data trend analysis that you would like to do. And recovery and collections is variety of models depicting a certain behavior, the action effect of the customer, and high frequency rates. So your model short-term as well as long-term. In the case of acquisition, you have rejection rates and you have first-time defaulter payments. And then you have the long-term model evaluation, which is discriminatory accuracy and stability. Management, pretty much all of these in place because you've got to do that on a day-to-day basis. Collection recovery usually is a long-term measure. And that is when the long-term model evaluation needs to work in this particular setup of the customer. Okay, so that's broadly what we wanted to cover or talk about these areas that we spoke about. There was another mention in the beginning today that spoke about area under curve, and I will just share a slide on that side also. So there are some fraud benchmarks that we use, and that fraud benchmarks talks about area under curve, which is able to distinguish whether it is a fraudulent segment or not a fraudulent segment. So for example, in this case, credit card, telecommunication, and financial statements have a high area under curve. And if they have a high area under curve, which means the chances of frauds are higher in that particular case because the percentage seems to be pretty high. Insurance and social security have the lowest. Now, this is some benchmark that we need to be mindful about. An AUC of 0.5 suggests no discrimination, that is the ability to diagnose fraudulence versus non-fraudulence. 0.7 to 8 is considered acceptable, whereas 8 or 9 is considered excellent. Anything more than 0.9 is considered outstanding. So obviously, higher the number, the better it is. And that is what this area under curve analysis typically helps you to do, that to be able to interpret whether you have a fraudulent segment or a non-fraudulent segment that you're dealing with. As this is again done at the portfolio level. Yeah, and it's a very good benchmark to know how healthy is your customer portfolio. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to our term and exam? All right, so we understand that you have topics that you want to cover. There are two model sets that you're going to be working on. So if you are doing the first paper, you have 3 questions, obviously for whatever 20 marks each. Question 1 is a question by itself for 20 marks. Question 2 is split into 2 sections, 2A and 2B, 10 marks each. And the third question is a 20-mark question by itself. Now here, like in this case, the third question is an analytical question, which is similar to the one that we did to identify credit card cases of fraud. So there is some data given to you and you're expected to do that. You can do that in Excel and you can upload the file in Excel as well. The first question talks about the first day that we talked about different types of fraud. So there's a scenario given to you and you should be able to tell us what type of fraud is visible and what are the measures that you can do to overcome that kind of fraud based on the scenario given to you. Question 2 and 2B are pretty straightforward from that point of view, and they are asking you to understand or talk about something with regards to fraud and risk analytics and risk assessment matrix, and that is something that you need to put together. So which is basically our session 2 and our session 4 today. So there is a question in a sense from each of the sessions that we have discussed or talked about paper 1. Seems a very straightforward, a very interesting one for me particularly. We've talked about it. We've done exercises on this in the class. And those of you who've contributed positively, I don't see you having any issue with this paper to be able to understand and solve the exam to your satisfaction. Now, in case you're giving the second paper and not the first one, for whatever reason that may be, and that is, the first question is a certain scenario given to you, and you're expected to calculate these risk metrics like the one we did today. And that is what you got to do, and that is for 20 marks. Just be a little careful based on the numbers that you are seeing. The second one gives you a little bit about identifying credit card fraud with some data given to you, and you can do that in Excel. And the third one is talking to you about, risk analysis and basically everything that we've talked about today. Yes, I mean, last class and this class on risk is what you need to talk about there. So pretty straightforward. I don't think that should be an issue as long as you've, done your contributions into class and understood. I don't see that as a problem at all. So in the second paper, you have three questions, 1, 2, and 3. In the first paper, you have 4 questions, with the second question being for 2 parts. And that's what you are expected to do as part of your term end exam. Yes. Yes, Agya, how can I not help you?
So, Professor, there was one confusion in the TE that do we need to write all the answers in the Excel or in the text box of the Metal program? So I guess we need to write in the Metal platform itself.
Yes,
and
you need to write in the Metal platform
is
itself.
it necessary to use Excel, or we can also write calculations in the text box itself using the calculator?
See, if I am asking you to use Excel, it is better to, because you can show the workings and the calculations in itself. It is self-evident as opposed to writing it out. So I would prefer that if the option is given, I would do that analysis in Excel.
Okay, because sometimes there's an issue using an Excel while Metal.
So if there is an issue, then of course, then you got to make sure that what you write in Metal is absolutely explanatory, clear, and correct, so that there is no room for any misinterpretation. Yeah. So just be very, very clear, bulletize, and put your answers through.
Yes, because in that case we need to switch screens for the Excel.
Yeah,
so
correct.
if we can write crisp and precise in the Metal text box, then it would be good, right?
Yeah. If you're writing in Metal, please write the approach very clearly as to what you are doing.
All right, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, Professor, in the second set if we appear, so we are expected to have 2 questions on analytical questions on to be solved on Excel.
No, one only. The other one is basically a straightforward one. You don't need Excel to solve that, but one of them you do need Excel, and therefore we've given you the file upload possibility for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good.
Professor, in the slot one, which you told that there would be analytical, can you repeat in like what part you said that for the slot one it would be based kind of on today's class that we did, but for the first.
No, this is paper 1, right? Paper 1, there is some set of data given to you, and you're expected to analyze it and identify fraudulent cases like we did in, I think, session 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So in both the papers, option 1, paper 1 or paper 2, one of the question has an Excel analysis to be done using Excel. Now, for whatever reason you can't do it, then be very clear in the approach so that it becomes crystal clear that you've thought through it. Sometimes people have done their work, but they only write the final answer, which is not accepted. The approach is as good or important than the final answer is. Yeah. Any other questions, people? We will be leaving. I'm just going to call for the feedback. The feedback links would be there already, right? Do you have them, or does it get activated?
No, it is provided in the chat by the.
Yes, and they should come now, right? Every time he gives me his number, this time I didn't take it. So I don't know.
She also can, he or she can also share us on the Telegram channel. They do this.
Sorry?
They also sometimes share it on our Telegram channel also.
Is it? Okay. Let's wait for some 5 more minutes and then let's see what we can. And then otherwise, yeah, then probably that is good enough. So you can also get some time and we can also, call it. So how was the, all the whatever sessions that we've done, guys, for the last, today only I got to know that there are 113 of you in this class. And I thought there were a maximum 30 of you in this class. So how was the sessions, guys, those who attended? Was it good? Of course, the feedback I have not seen as yet. So I'm assuming it is okay. I have not got it as yet. I was not able to check while you filled in. But any comments there, guys? Anyone? Are we good?
Well, just a point. I just felt like for a people from a non finance background or with much of exposure to this banking and stuff, I felt like the explanation. I mean, I don't have any issues at all with the class and sessions and explanations, but the content I felt it is bit much for me to grasp because particularly async. I mean, when I say that. So there are lot many things to cover, to remember, to produce. I know. So if you go by basic logic and rational, it looks simple, but going into the concepts and understanding those, I felt it is too much. The previous subject as well as I felt this subject too.
When you say previous subject, what are you referring to?
No, not in this term. The previous subject, which is on again marketing, digital analytics. I mean,
okay.
So just a point from my end.
No issues, Bharani. Unfortunately, I have not developed that, but I hear you. So if the async, whatever the model is too heavy, I have what I do is from it is whatever is relevant from the industry perspective is what we've spoken about, and the activities that we've done are there. So forget what you've seen. I mean, don't take me literally, but downplay what you've read and upplay of what we've done in class. And if you're good to go there, then I would say you're good to go academically and professionally.
Yeah, Professor. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Professor, for the TE prep, is it sufficient if we can just go through all the LS PPTs?
Oh, more than enough. In fact, even if you don't go through, if you've participated in all the 4 sessions, just a half an hour mental meditation with fraud and risk analytics should do it for you.
And one point I need to ask about the project, I mean, if I can. So yeah, in the first 2 questions, we need to plot graphs with, for example, with other categories versus the default.
Okay, I have just, sorry, I'm just going to read that in a minute so that I can help you answer it. Yeah, first graph. Correct.
So
you
the
can
first
just
2 questions
out,
we need to plot the graph between the various categories versus the default, because default is the constant in every.
Correct. And
every
therefore
question.
the segment analysis will give you that. Yeah.
Yes. So basically when we plot the graph, since we have default of value 0 or 1, so when we get the bar plot, we have that average of each category.
Correct.
For example, for grade A, we have 0.2, for B, and so on. So is it the right track that we are going? And on those terms, do we need to write?
You can just give, you can just index it to 100 and give it out of 100 also. Yeah.
Okay. No, I was thinking like the bar plot directly gives like for a category, for example, in a grade for grade A, the default is 0.2 average, and for other is 0.3. So in those terms, we can write.
Yeah, and in the end, no, just for making my life a little bit easier, just put percentages, please. That you can put as a text also, as a table also, as a box also.
So in that case, we need to find the percent by finding the each category divided by the total.
By the total, yeah. So index it to 100. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is much easier for me to go through the papers.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll have to sit and do that, and I'm a little lazy there. That's why.
So in that case, just numbers should be fine, or we should display it in a graph.
No, just numbers is also fine for me. A graph is optional.
Okay.
Because
Now let's come back to it. Display it in a graph as long as it can show. If you are not able to calculate it, the percentages, it's okay. I will go with what I see in terms of what I can know. As long as you tell me which are the segments which are more likely to default and which are the ones that are less likely to default. Okay, let's make it that way.
okay, yeah, great. That would help.
Yeah.
Good.
Then, yeah.
Fine. Okay. Good, guys. So we will call it a day, and good luck, guys. Keep in touch, and let me know if there's anything that fraud and risk has done to you, which will obviously it'll do in terms of analytics, and better preparation. So good luck, guys. Stay safe, and we see you in the future. Take care.
Thanks, Professor. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye.
Professor. Live sessions are really good. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Gohan. Please put that as a comment as well on feedback.
Sure.
Actually, it made our life easier with async.
Good. Thank you. Mention that.
Thanks, Professor. Sure.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.